Hi, it's Jared from Strong Roots Farm. Today we are talking soils and specifically soil testing. All right, in today's video we'll cover all the details. So there's the tools and the equipment, the things you're going to need to collect the sample. How do you collect the sample, where you lay it out? There's kind of lots of different theories here. I'll show you what I do and why, go over that. And then where you send it off for whatever you're looking to get from it. There are many different types of soil tests with many different costs and in depth. So the more you pay for, the more you get really with a soil test. I will recommend those labs that I have used in the past, but you could look for a lab, and I recommend that you do that is closer to you. But stick around, we're gonna go through all these details today in this video right after this. All right, welcome back. Thanks everybody for joining us. First, we're gonna start with tools before we go out to the field to show how to do this. And so you need something of a soil sample. This is a soil sample tool. I like this. They're pretty cheap. I will put a link in the description for these. You do not have to have this, but it is very handy. The one negative thing about this is it's a one-time use kind of a tool, as far as this is the only thing it does. It collects soil and then it hangs on the shelf there until next year. And so I take soil tests every year to every other year, depending on what the conditions are. And I like this tool. You can use a spade shovel, like a big construction shovel. You can use a little gardening spade shovel as well. The importance is you got to kind of dig it in the method of this. So think about, you're looking for a 1/2 inch to a 2 inch cylindrical or square section of the soil, 4 to 6 inches deep. And so if you get more of the upper soil because you dig in a V than you do the bottom, your soil test will be off as far as the organic matter or whatever you're looking for, because you're going to have more topsoil than that 6 inch deep. So you really want a perfect depth, whether it be a square or whatever. And I find that that is easier with a tool like this. But if you're going to dig it with a shovel or a spade, dig a hole and then take a sliver off of the side of the hole and break that in. So basically I take that sliver with the shovel, it's 2 inches thick and the whole depth of the hole, and then I'll cut out a section of that and put it into some kind of a container. The container that you use during collection does not matter as far as what type, but it does need to be clean. Anything that is foreign, so if it's an old feed bucket or old mineral bucket or whatever it would be, if it has that material in it, it could end up in your soil and mess your soil sample up. So I recommend a very clean bucket, or go to your wife's pantry and steal some Tupperware. Calm down, ladies. I'm gonna put it back when I'm done. All right, the second thing is, where do you dig? Like, do you plot out a field? And it would really be helpful in this video if I had a field map, but look at Google Earth or any kind of map of your property, and you can grid it out if you want. You can pick different sections. I tend to, because our land is fairly flat, if the field is all kind of the same level with all the same kind of soil and all the same kind of grass growing on it, I can get away with one sample for the entire field. I'll plot in 6, 8, 12 different spots. I'll take a sample, I'll mix that sample together, and then I send in one sample. Note that you are paying for each sample that you send in. But if I had multiple farms or multiple fields, so this field here, the field across the street, the field down the road, I would make 3 samples because I would want to know the difference in each farm. And I'll show this as we go out to the field, but also if I had a farm that had multiple different levels. So for instance, I had an upper pasture that was full sun all the time, and then I had a large sloping area, and then I had a bottom. That's really 3 different types of environment. So if you have a wetter area, a wetland, and you have an upper area, the soil contents are going to be different, and really the amendments should be different in those areas. So in that case, I would probably break that farm into 3 samples: the upper pasture area, the hillsides, and then the lower, creek bottom or whatever it would be, pasture area on that farm. Same thing, if I had double of those, it may take 6 samples for wherever. It just depends on how your farm looks, how you want to break it up, and how detailed you want to get with these amendments or whatever you're choosing to do. Now let's talk about the why. So why do we do soil samples? And most of you would probably, common sense would tell you this, is that the soil needs different things: minerals, nitrogen, phosphorus. You know, the NPK is the major three, but it also needs a lot of other things. And so if you're gonna add amendments, you don't wanna just randomly add lime or fertilizer or whatever it would be. You wanna add only what the soil needs. But what about a farm like ours, where we don't put any synthetic fertilizers on our fields year after year per se, and we don't really add lime unless there's a major issue with our farm? So why would we even do a soil testing? That's a good question, I'm glad you asked. It's because we wanna see how well we're doing. Okay, so I like to have a record of my soil throughout year after year after year. And I had this grand idea when I came here that I would take and cut out a section and put it in a jar. And every year I would have this jar for 50 years on the farm and show how the soil improved. That didn't work out. That was a kind of a dream, you know, as we were reading books before we started farming 15 years ago. But we want to see how we're doing. We're rotationally grazing, we're using cattle, we're using chickens, we're not overgrazing, you know, we try not to, so we're giving back to the soils, we're not putting chemicals on our soil, so our microbiology is growing. We have bird houses and all kinds of other things to bring in wildlife. Are we doing what we need to do to build better soil? Is our soil depth getting better? Is the nutrients in our soil correct? You know, based on our mineral program for our cattle and all of these things. Everything that they say to do in books, or that I thought I should do, is it really working? Is it the truth? Has somebody fed me a lie and I believed a lie? This is how you test if what you're doing is working, is with these soil samples. Now, some people say that you can visually go out and see that you're doing the right thing because your grass is growing better. And that's one variable, that's one thing. But to really know the elemental microbiology of what's going on in your soil, you need a good soil sample. And so we do this to see, are we doing the right things? Are we missing something? Do we need to change? That's why we do soil samples. The other reason we do a soil sample is if we have new ground, which we do. We just got this lease on this farm next to us. It's been soybeans for the last 40 years. And so we're changing it over to pastures. And so we need a soil sample. How bad is it? How bad has it been destroyed? And do I need to add amendments? If you've watched my channel very long, this is the one time that I will add synthetic fertilizers. So not very much, not what Big Ag says I need, but if we're really depleted on one particular thing on this farm, we may add a synthetic fertilizer or lime or sulfur, whatever the soil would need to get the pasture started, okay, as we're starting the seeds. And so we are doing a pasture. If you've watched our channel long enough, we are doing a pasture test. So we have multiple different plots throughout this field, but essentially the field started in the same condition. So we need one soil test now, but then as we test all these different paddocks that we're raising and starting a brand new farm from scratch in different methods, we will need a soil test for each paddock to see which tests or which method works the best. All right, you got the tools, you got the why we do this. Now let's get out and I'm gonna show you how to do it and show you what we do today. Let's grab our tools, let's go out to the pasture. All right, so I said pasture, but it's just a bean field right now. This is an old bean field. And so we're gonna take and get our soil sample out in these fields. You can see here, there's a, well, maybe you can see, there's a little dip right here. So when I take a sample, I'm gonna make sure I get one in the lower and one in the upper. This farm has about 7 acres of pasture. That's really it. It's a 21-acre farm, but it's predominantly wooded area. There is some acreage where they haven't grazed in the past that I will be able to turn into silvo pastures eventually. But there's basically 2 to 2.5 acre fields. And so in these fields, I'm gonna get 4, 5 plugs in each field, test spots, and then we're gonna put them all in one and mix them into one, which I'll show. Everything will go in here, we'll mix it up, and we'll gain one sample. So if you have a field like this, just walk around. Pick 4 or 5 different spots per acre, perhaps, and get a little teeny sample. It doesn't really matter where you get In fact, random is probably better, but you want to not be close to each other. That's the first thing. We talked about in a low spot versus a high spot, you should get those. The other thing I want to warn you about is a fence line or a tree line, okay? So if you have a 50-acre field and you have 500 feet of tree line, you want to stay away from that tree line. You don't want to get a sample within 50 feet of that tree line, because that 50 feet is going to be very different in soil content. And if you're sending off one sample, that one plug can really mess up all 50 acres. Now, in a farm like this, where it's just 2 acres, it's not going to make a big difference, but you want a good average roundabout sample. What is the true, view of the whole farm as a whole? Whereas if you took one spot over there next to those trees, the soil is going to be very different. So on a field like that, I would kind of stay out in the main part of the field. Like I said, at least 50, maybe 75 feet away from those trees for the first test. All right, one thing I forgot to mention was not only do I need my tool, my soil tester tool, I'm going to need a screwdriver, and you'll see why here in a second. Let's get down on the ground and I'll show you how we take, I call it a plug, how we take the soil sample. Okay, we're simply going to take our soil tester tool, and they make multiple ones. I'll talk about that when we get back to the shop, but we're just going to shove this down on the ground, and I kind of spin as I push down. Work it back and forth, and I usually go to the top of that opening. Then I'm going to spin in one whole turn clockwise or counterclockwise, it doesn't matter. Pull it back out, and there is our sample. We're then going to take our screwdriver and push our dirt out into whatever container. This is where it really helps to have a 5-gallon bucket. So if a new clean 5-gallon bucket is your thing, you'll stick this down in the 5-gallon bucket, and as you're cleaning this out, it'll flop into the bucket. So if you're trying to hold over top of something and push it down in, it can kind of flop everywhere, and that's why I did it outside the container to show you. But we're simply going to dig all this soil out and push it down into our container. And you can see the bottom is kind of hard to get out because this is clay soil where we're at. And so I'll have to dig all this out and get it. Now, on the very last sample, it's important to get all of it, but the next sample will push some of this dirt right here up, and it'll still end up in our bucket, so I'm okay with that. I'm gonna go along now. I'm gonna do these 3 fields in this farm, take multiple samples everywhere. I'll put it down in my container, and then we'll go back into the shop and I'll show you what we're gonna do next. Okay, I've completed my sample. So I will show this on film here. You can see, don't wanna lose any of it. We have some full plugs, which will break apart, but it's crumbles. If I would have got a stick or a big rock, I would have threw that out, okay? So a big, something foreign there, I would have took that out, but I'm gonna mix all this up. And so basically I'm gonna take my hands and crush all this up. Now, I left it in this clear container for the video, but you can see where a 5-gallon bucket would be very useful because you could really mix around and tear this up, get it all kind of to a powder, and you wouldn't have to worry about swashing around. But that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna mix this all up and get it prepped. Once we have the entire sample completely broke down, all the same consistency, and we mix and mix and mix, we can then bag our sample up. And so depending on where you're gonna take it, that will determine what you're gonna do with it now. Let's talk about where do we send it now? We got it. So if you're in the US, most of my viewers are, I'm gonna recommend your local ag extension agent, okay? So if you have a southern state or some kind of big rural farm cooperative for big ag, you can take them there as well. Places like that will have them. I've never seen Rural King, TSC, anybody like that do a soil sample. Or you can Google and find a local lab, which I used Logan Labs in the past. They are here in Logan, Ohio. A lot of people around this area use them. They are very good. They are expensive because your soil sample, your soil test, they do many more readouts. So there's much more information that comes with them. And they have different plans. They have a basic and then all the way to a premium, whatever they call them, to determine what you get with them. If you are going to mail it off to a specific lab, you need to go to the lab's website. They will have a form of some sort that you will have to fill out that is specific to them, and they will have a certain package. Most of the time, you have to pre-order these. So the Logan Labs, call, get the package. It'll tell you you can put it in this kind of a baggie, in this kind of box, or you can order baggies and they'll be at your house in a week, and you can put your samples into their specific bag. But they all have their own process. So no, labeling, all that kind of stuff is going to be explained on each lab's website. Now, if you are using your local ag extension agent, which I am going to this time, I'm going to try. That's the first time I've ever done that. I've always sent off to Logan Labs. But this year, I decided to use my local agent. He's a young new guy. I want to see how this works, see what I get back from Ohio State. And I'm going to just take my sample to him, probably in this Tupperware. Take it up there, he'll have the bag, he'll help me put it in, he'll help me label it, see how they want to do, and he'll send that off for me. One reason I'm doing that is because it's not as expensive as Logan Labs, so it's a little cheaper that way. And two, I want to see what I get back from Ohio State versus an expensive lab test. Now, once you mail your sample off, it'll take, a designated amount of time, 2 to 3 weeks. Most labs are about that. Typically, they email you the results. So they'll charge your card or however you pay. They email you the results. And then you can also get a paper copy sent from Logan Labs at least and have that or print it off or whatever. I do recommend you save this and file this and look at these year after year. But now that you have all this data, how do you read it? Well, unfortunately, that is a totally different video and a totally different education. So it takes a lot to understand how to read these things as far as getting in depth and what you should do. But once you have the sample, if you're going to buy a fertilizer, a lime from some place, you should be able to take your results from your soil sample there, and they can help you identify that. Logan Labs offers a consult. So it's more money, but they will get your tests from there, and they have somebody that works there that will call and talk to you and work through what you're looking to do. So if you're a gardener, if you're, whatever kind of thing you're doing, pasture or grain, they'll tell you what they think and what they recommend you to do based on what you want to do. Are you trying to be organic? Are you big ag? What are you doing? Potting mixes? So they're going to go through that with you, and it is a good resource, but it does cost extra money. But the basics of reading the results is not very hard, okay? So it'll show you this is the range you're supposed to be in. Kind of like if you went and got blood work and it said your triglycerides are supposed to be between this and you're here, you need to cut out fat. It's the same kind of thing with a soil sample. It's going to say your nitrogen levels are here, and this is where we recommend you should be based on what you told us or what the average is. Now, if you did not tell them pasture, if it doesn't say for pasture, they're probably recommending for a row crop. So that is the part that you have to learn to read or talk to somebody. Logan Labs had that for me, what I was looking to do, and this is where I'm at. And so there are recommendations sometimes in notes, but they don't actually say, do this for 100% success. You kind of have to figure that out on your own. Your local ag extension agent in the US, once again, is a great resource for this as well. He can help you with that. There are books on this. You can look up YouTube webinars from universities on this and gain some help in this. But I have been able to figure this out on my own throughout time. So I look, say, okay, I need this. I have some friends I ping ideas off of. I've read stuff in books, and I've been able to get by. I didn't have to go to college to learn to read a soil sample. Well, there you have it. That's how you take a soil sample, how you put it together, and how you send it off. My recommendations are down in the description. I do want to talk about a few other things because I know I'm going to get questions about these. What about at-home testing kits? So if you look on Amazon, they're anywhere from $150 to $2,000, these machines. Should you buy an at-home testing kit? Well, here's my recommendation. I don't own one because I don't think these things are as accurate as an actual lab. And the cost of them is pretty expensive to not guarantee yourself that you're going to get all the results that you need like you do from a lab. So the cost of a soil sample can be somewhere between $15 and $75 depending on what you want to get, whereas a testing kit that's worth its weight is probably going to cost you at least $400 to $500. You can buy a lot of samples with that. And so if you had a large farm and you were constantly testing soil and you gained some knowledge on this, maybe. But for me, small-time farmer, homesteader, I'm just going to go ahead and pay the lab to do it. And I don't trust myself necessarily with those at-home tests. How accurate really are they? What chemicals do I have to buy to do the tests? So I choose to stay away from them. What about the soil probes? So you've seen these, especially in gardeners. They stick this probe down into the ground and it tells you some soil information. First off, these things are not high tech as far as giving you NPK, giving you calcium levels, all the other things that a soil sample will give you. They don't really give you that stuff. They predominantly give pH and moisture level. Moisture level doesn't really matter for pastures. You can't really change that unless you're going to irrigate. That's more for a gardener or a potter, somebody doing something like that. pH in these things, I've seen them be off as much as 1 whole point, meaning I did a soil sample that said 6.7, but this little reader said 7.7 or 5.7. They can be off that much. For 25 bucks, I don't think these things can actually be that accurate. But to give you a roundabout idea of where you're at, yes, you could buy one of these probes. Some are better than others. The cheap ones are probably not going to be that great, but you can put them down in the soil. It'll get you, let's say if it gets you within a half of a point, you're roundabout going to know what the pH is, but they don't give you all the factors that you get in a soil sample. So I don't have those things either. I have purchased one. I have played with one. And tried to do it with when we were doing market gardening. It just wasn't accurate enough for me, so I stay away from them. Well, there you have it. I hope this video helps. And I just realized I have my Hoover Dam shirt on as I'm right here at the end of the video. So if I offended you with that, I'm sorry for my vulgar dam joke. Appreciate everybody watching, sticking through. I hope this helps you on your farm. I do recommend, especially if you're starting out, one of the very first things you should do when starting a farm or a homestead, you bought a piece of property, get the soil tested. Today I showed you in a bean field. If I came in and I bought a farm and it had pasture on it, I would still test it. I would move the grass aside, try to find a spot where I could get down in the soil. Don't go through a clump of grass. Try to find a spot that's open and get soil that way. I would test every farm that I bought day one, okay? It's very important before I did anything, before I drove over it, anything. The very first thing I would do when I closed on that farm or that homestead or whatever it would be is to go get that soil sample, go get that soil test. The one thing I didn't talk about though in this video is timing, okay? So what if you bought in the winter? What if you bought in the summer? Do you test the same time all year round? And their answer is it doesn't really matter, okay? You can test any time of the year. What I would tell you is test the same time every year when you test. I typically test, it's now March. March to April is when I do my soil samples and soil test so that they're all comparable when you look line item to line item. But that is definitely the first thing I would do as you start or buy a homestead or a small farm. For watching, please comment down below. Let me know if this helps you. Let me know if you disagree with me. If you think these things are worthless and you don't need them because you're not going to add synthetic fertilizers anyways, let me know what you think. I'm open to all those opinions. Until next time, I appreciate you watching. We'll see you then.